When you know what you want for the future, you need the present to line up with your goals. UCF Online offers more than 100 fully online programs in healthcare, engineering, criminal justice, and more, so you can get to your future and beyond.
From the University of Louisville's Delphi Center for Teaching and Learning.
And the University of Central Florida's Center for Distributed Learning.
I'm Kelvin Thompson.
And I'm Tom Cavanaugh.
And you, dear listener, are listening to the final 15 episodes of Topcast, the Teaching Online podcast.
In the home stretch, final 15 scheduled. I'll be that guy that keeps doing that.
You should do that.
Got to keep that door cracked just a little for us to slip back in once in a while and go, hey, we're still here. We got thoughts.
We've got thoughts. That should be our new title. We've got thoughts. After this episode, I mean, it'll be like 10 more.
All right.
More of the
Thanks
schedule.
for the math. I was told there would be no math.
Well, you know, it's easy math. I'm only so good at the numbers. But maybe this is worth now a good jumping off point, maybe a moment to pause and talk about that 200th episode for a moment. You want to say anything about the 200th episode now that we can say something about it?
Sure. I think everybody should try to make their plans to attend Online Learning Consortium, OLC's Accelerate Conference in November, because there'll be a little Topcast special event where we will live record our final scheduled episode.
Yeah, our friends at OLC have been very generous to grant us a plenary panel spot on the Wednesday of the 2025 Accelerate Conference. And I'm calling it, it's been out, it's been put on a website. It could change, I don't know. But we're calling it Last Call at the Topcast Cafe. So if you can make it, come on in and join the fun. If you can't make it, though, for the in-person session, please consider submitting questions or comments for us to tackle during the session. You could do that now. More information and the question form are available online using the Dub shortening service at the following URL, which we'll also put in the show notes. That is dub.sh/lastcalltopcast. dub.sh/lastcalltopcast, all lowercase, no spaces.
All right. Yeah. Please do. We're toying with some ideas on how we want to handle that last episode, and if we get some good contributions from you all listeners, maybe we'll bake them in.
Bake them in.
Yep. Speaking of baking, speaking of brewing and cooking, I just saw you taking a sip. So, Kelvin, I will ask the question that's on everyone's mind. What's in the thermos?
Well, in the thermos and in my cup today, Tom, is a single origin Colombia Chaparral Tolima from a roaster sourced many times in our in-person coffee drinking days, and that I might bring around and pour out of the thermos in the office even. This is from Black Gold Coffee Roasters in Venice, Florida. I found this to be a fairly tasty cup. I wonder if you can find a connection to today's topic.
Well, I'm assuming it's not the fact that UCF is black and gold.
No, but that's cool though, right?
Yeah, it is cool. Love Venice, Florida. Love the southwest of Florida. It's a nice part of the state. I'm trying to think here. You did, would you say that we've drunk it many times in person together?
Yep, in person together.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're there. I mean, I thought the in-person thing. We're going to feature today an interview recording that you actually did in person at UCF, which isn't all that common anymore. I don't know. You might have even done it I don't really know this. You might have even done it in the audio booth where we used to record Topcast for a long time.
I actually did not. We recorded it in my office using the portable recorder that we've many times taken to OLC Accelerate and recorded interviews with. But yeah, of course. And black and gold does fit because we did record it in person here on site here at UCF.
There you go. So I guess with no further ado, I'll say that, Tom, you recently, shall we say, completed the bingo card of podcast crossover guest interviews with our colleagues from over at the Online Education Across the Atlantic podcast by interviewing renowned market consultant Dr. Glenda Morgan. Morgan is currently a market analyst covering teaching and learning applications in higher education for Phil Hill and Associates. And prior to joining them, she covered the same set of topics at Gartner. And prior to that, she worked in higher education at a range of institutions, including the University of Wisconsin system and the University of Illinois. And we have previously had Morgan's podcast co-host Phil Hill and Neil Mosley on Topcast in episodes 174 and 140, respectively. Look for links to those in the show notes for this episode if you don't remember them. Tom, is there anything you'd like to say about the interview before we cut to it?
Maybe just very briefly. One, we've both known Morgan for many years and big, fans of her work and respect her insights. I do think where she is now at Phil Hill and Associates is a really good match for kind of what she brings to the community. And she happened to be here on campus doing some interviews of us, doing some benchmarking, and it actually, I think it was related kind of more to some client work that she was doing. But I wanted to take the opportunity while she was here to stick a microphone in her face and ask her some questions, and I was very grateful that she took the time to do so. So as you said, we can check off that podcast crossover bucket list, and just grateful to Morgan for sitting down and doing the interview.
All right, through the modern technological marvel that is podcast time travel, here is your interview with Glenda Morgan.
Well, Morgan, thank you so much for being on Topcast.
Thank you so much for having me at UCF, and it's so nice to be in person.
It really is. I don't get to do these interviews in person very often, so it's a bit of a special treat for me too.
Yeah.
Well, we were very fortunate to have you share some of your thoughts this morning in a presentation to our team, and got me thinking, and I thought maybe we could revisit some of that for the Topcast audience.
Sounds good.
So you had your kind of 10 things you're interested in and learning more about or digging into in online learning. And I thought I would maybe just start with the first one. I have my notes here. And it's something I've thought a lot about. When will online learning stop growing? I'll set up my kind of opinion here because I've had the same question. Because UCF has been on a steady, unrelenting growth trend for 30 years, 29 years this year. And I keep saying it can't go on forever. At some point, we're going to start to plateau. But I thought you made a really interesting point. I wonder if you can maybe comment on it, because the numbers you shared were about at least one online course. Mm-hmm. And for us, that may reach a 95%. But I don't think we're ever going to see, even nationally outside of the fully online universities, 100%. So I don't know if you've given that some thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to be honest, I was looking for that graph with just the pure online, and I couldn't find that pincer.
Yeah.
And Phil has made them the pincer graphs because they start to run in and cross each other, and he's traced the trajectory of online growth, and it's much higher than it would have been if not for the pandemic. But yeah, where is it going to settle? Because it has to settle someplace. And yeah, there's always going to be a place for in-person learning. We just started by talking about how nice it was to be in person. And even though I'm a horrible introvert, even I like people once in a while. But I think we have that. I think we're probably getting close to it in some ways. Especially in the graduate space, that has continued to grow. But I think it grew really rapidly, and it's reached quite a heavy saturation rate. So I wonder if that'll be the canary in the coal mine for where online settles. And I think we'll probably see growth in undergrad, fully online undergrad, a bit longer. But yeah, I think it'll probably be in the 30s or 40%. That's where my guess would be. But I'm really bad at guessing, so I wouldn't put money on it.
Well, and that graduate market seems to have been very cyclical. It seems like sometimes it's up and sometimes it's down. I keep hearing predictions that 1 year it's we're going to go up in the graduate market, and other years it's really soft, and certificates is where it's at, and feels like, what is it this year?
Yeah, no, I think that certainly is true. And, it's been driven by some different factors than the undergrads in some ways, much more in terms of the search for revenue plays out much more in the graduate space rather than an effort to reach new populations or provide that flexibility. So I think there's different dynamics there. But, as I ask later, are we going to see the same thing happening in newer markets like the UK? Is that going to be graduate level growth? And what is that going to look like? And the graduate level growth is sort of interesting because it's also just different. It's much more lumpy to my sense, So, we've talked a little bit about MBAs, but there's, last I counted, there were more than 400 online MBAs, and if you look at some of the offerings, like now there's a big run on online masters of data science and those sorts of things. So things tend to be, it's much more bandwagon driven in a way than I think.
Let's put AI in the title, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we'll sell that. Yeah. Well, let me move on to your second one, which I also thought was an interesting one, and maybe a related, area of inquiry. What will the market for online learning look like? And you broke it up into a couple different dimensions when you're looking at state location and market concentration and things like that. So maybe we'll start with concentration. An interesting observation that I guess I had heard before, but it's always good to be reminded that, just say 10 or 20%, some very small percentage of the market is concentrated in just like a half a dozen institutions. Yeah,
so the original data I got was, and the chart that I showed was from McKinsey, which was in 2019. So 2019 data from IPEDS showed that, the top 10 schools had 20% of the online market, which is kind of amazing. If you think about the number of higher education institutions, 3,000 or so in the US, and that sort of concentration, and you really don't get that in terms of in-person. And we've been trying to track that. So we wrote a post, Phil and I, in 2023 that looked at how that had changed, and it had gone down actually from 2019 to the then current 21-22 data. It had gone from like 19.6 to 14.8 or something like that. And I'm keen to revisit that soon in another post to sort of see how that has shifted, because I think there's some things driving it towards less concentration, as more schools are interested in going online, and the impact of growing acceptance of online from the pandemic and things like that. But then also just, increased regulation and those sorts of things are driving more concentration. So I think there's some interesting dynamics there. And it was great to have Chuck Jubin in the audience. Though
Always is great to have Chuck.
He does make my brain hurt because he makes me think very hard. And he made the observation of that chart that I showed from McKinsey, which was that it's a power law that a lot accrues to the big early actors, and so I think that's something we do have to explore, to see how that sort of goes, because the dynamics are different than obviously in person, where you're bound by geography and space constraints and things like that.
Yeah, well, it's heartening to me to hear at least the trend, which I guess you're going to have to see where it is right now, but the more diffuse number of institutions offering online, that market penetration spreading across all of the schools, maybe a little bit more. I as a free market person, I don't know if I like all of everything being kind of concentrated in just a few options for consumers, in this case, for students.
Yeah, and I think, one of the sort of strengths to me of the US higher education system is just that variation and that choice. You've got community colleges and different kinds of community colleges and liberal arts schools and different kinds of things. And it would be great to sort of have more of that in the online space. And I think we will tend to see that, because I think also local knowledge is important, that even though you can go to school wherever, knowing who UCF is or who the University of Utah is or Snow College in Utah, I think is important to people. So I think that will continue to play out. And, as I kept mentioning the Chloe data, which I think is really useful, it shows that students do tend to go close to where they live. And intriguingly, the member of your staff that I spoke to right after the presentation, she went to UCF online and for undergrad and masters, and she lives 10 minutes away and always did. So it just worked for her.
Well, there are a lot of reasons why people take online besides being distant, right?
Flexibility,
right.
And
Work.
For her, it also, I think the primary reason was it fit her way of working.
And that Chloe data, but it's also that's long-standing understanding that I think what I had always heard was that most students go to an institution within 100 miles of their home. There's brand affinity, there's trust of the institution, it, and I think even if people never go, I think surveys say that they want to know they can just get in the car and drive there.
I have a friend who worked at a big online master's program, actually, UNC Chapel Hill, and she always says you always underestimate the number of students who actually want to come visit, because even though they really do have a national and international reach, students wanted to come and actually see where it all happens. So,
all right, so you actually touched on the next part of your kind of market issue, which was the location, and maybe I'll just jump ahead to institutions investing heavily in online.
Yeah.
And I've always been kind of fascinated by that. Like, why would you? And when I do consulting, sometimes I wonder if institutions really understand, like, are you really committed to being successful, or do you just like the idea of generating revenue?
Yeah. I before I gave the talk, I was joking with you and Chuck about one of my jokes that I tell about, the 10 laws of EdTech, one of which is never let your president go to a conference. It's he'll always come back wanting you to build Penn State, World Campus. And It happened to me twice. That's why it's a rule. And it's like, well, they started a long time ago and they did all these things. But I wanted to raise that because we do see some institutions that aren't the big online ones. So they aren't Southern New Hampshire, they aren't Western Governors, they aren't Liberty, but that are becoming increasingly online. And it's going to be interesting shifts that sort of happen there, I think. Some of them, I think, really do understand, and especially that sort of swirling of students, that internal swirling of students from on campus to online and back again, I think is an interesting option.
How much of that do you think is potentially enabled by third-party or OPM partnerships? Because, an institution can basically buy capacity and speed to get into the online space by partnering, but they're giving up revenue in order to do that.
Yeah, and actually I think that swirling issue is actually hindered by OPMs because you pay according to where the students start, and so it becomes really complicated if they're starting on campus. They're already your people, becomes this massive accounting thing. But certainly the OPM allows you to get online quickly and gets that thing, and sometimes allows you to make mistakes, I think, as well. Interestingly, one of the things that OPMs also particularly sort of do is help you cut through some of the inertia, which I think a lot of schools just have that inertia, and just having a third party be there, it's sort of, okay, we need to take action. When I was at Gartner, there was one school that I spoke to, actually two schools that I spoke to every single year, and they would say, we really need to be getting online and to start building online. And then the next year, we'd be back again. We really need to be building and I just had half an hour, and I'd sort of say, well, you need to do this, this, and this, and I probably told them to come visit you here, but they never really took action. One of them actually has taken action in the last year, but the other one is still saying, yeah, we need to get into this online thing, and they've been saying that since 2015. So
wow, well, it's that we've said it before on this podcast that kind of leadership matters, right? You need really a vision and executive champion to do something like this.
It's hugely important. Yeah, that is almost like a number one kind of thing. And I joke about the president wanting to build Penn State. You kind of need that sort of like commitment to it, because it's going to take time, it's going to take money, and it's not going to be an easy slog in a way.
Right.
But
you're gonna meet resistance along the way, and having the executives say, I understand, but we're doing it.
Yeah. And increasingly, I think it's going to have to be something that places do. I think there'll be some places that don't do online, but I think they'll be in the minority. For one reason or the other.
Like, I've always said that there might be specialized seminaries or service academies or something where there's a reason why they're not doing online. But other than that, if it's not intentional, Kelvin and I have talked about this in an episode not that long ago. Whether you're going to be online or not be online, it should be an intentional, strategic decision either way.
Yeah, no, and I'm seeing more places actually have online strategies. As I sort of poke around online, I see more of them than I used to. It's hard to count because it's such a amorphous chunk.
Yeah. Well, you had a bunch of questions here about international, both what's happening in other countries and what we are doing here in the United States to recruit those, but I don't think we have time to cover them. So what I'd like to do is sort of jump to your student success, because I think that's something we all care deeply about. And there are, you can pick up any Inside Higher Ed issue and probably find some article about, well, I did online learning with my class and they didn't do as well as my face-to-face class. Ergo, online learning is not good. And that's still out there, but there's a lot of evidence that say like blended courses outperform face-to-face courses and other kinds of things. And I'm wondering what you're thinking about in the student success space.
Yeah, certainly, I think there's a lot of research about how to promote student success in online learning. It's not sort of making its way to some of the front lines. I think on the whole, student success, there's a problem around it, and a little bit of self-promotion. I'm going to start a newsletter soon called On Student Success to sort of surface some of these things. But there's a lot of misconceptions, particularly around online learning and student success. They're not understanding the sort of self-selection and the fact that a lot of people are doing online learning because they need flexibility, because they have a family, they have a job, those sorts of things that are going to work against their success rate generally, so you can't necessarily compare them. But I think it would be great to have more of a conversation about online student success and what you're doing. Like just simply coming here, I didn't realize you had student success coaches in your online program here. So just like talking about those sorts of things and sharing those sorts of things. There's an issue with best practices, but you need to sort of have. There's a woman from one of the SUNY schools who says there are no silver bullets, but there are lots. But there are lots of silver buckshot. You need some of those silver buckshot, in terms of student success and giving people ideas about how to sort of do that, because it is something we need to address, both in terms of on-campus students and online. But as online grows, I think we really need to focus on that and do it. And there are lots of good ideas out there. We just need to get them out as well.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to reading that.
Yeah.
I will subscribe. That's great. Maybe we'll have to have you back, but you've completed the trio of Neil and Phil and now Morgan have all been on the podcast.
And I was the best, right? I was the best.
You were in person.
Yeah.
So absolutely. Yeah. You could tell Phil and Neil I said so. Well, thank you so much for being on Topcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, Tom, that was your interview with our friend and colleague, Morgan. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, well, she's awesome. Her presentation was awesome too, which was the basis for pretty much this conversation. Obviously, her presentation was longer and went into a lot more detail, but you can kind of get a sense of some of the topics that she kind of is curious about and dug into a little bit.
Yeah, so I heard 4 things, maybe out of the 10 that she addressed with your team. Online growth, market concentration, geographic location, and student success.
Yeah.
Anything you want to say about any of those things?
Well, I mean, they're all things that I think you and I and people in our positions care an awful lot about. And maybe it's one reason, pardon me, that she was, that her presentation was so interesting. Honestly, not just to me, but to the whole team here. We had a full room, and I got a lot of comments afterwards saying, that was amazing. It was really, really useful insights that we got from her. So, maybe why don't we just start from the top with online growth? As I think I mentioned in the interview, I've been sort of watching where UCF is kind of maybe reaching some sort of stasis point on the number of credit hours annually we produce online. And I've often wondered, is there some sort of a saturation point where we're kind of like going to reach this equilibrium where we're going to maybe not be growing quite so much and there'll be some kind of balance between online modalities and blended and face-to-face. I'm not sure we're there yet, but in many ways, UCF has been a bit of a vanguard in this idea of hybridity and students taking a mixture of modalities. So I don't know, maybe we're a little bit of a canary in the coal mine to see maybe there is some number out there at each school to determine what is the saturation point. I don't, like I said, I don't think we've reached it yet, but I think it's a really interesting question. And she was speculating somewhere in the 30s to 40% as a potential number.
Which I think if I listened precisely enough, fully online undergraduate population somewhere in the 30s or about 40%, which then a different angle on that, I think I heard you all talk about maybe topping out at around 95% institution-wide in terms of students who are taking one or more online classes annually. Both of those are interesting.
We're not at that number now, certainly, but I could see it. I think that it's the rare school that has nothing. Yeah. That a student can't take any online courses at all. So that would be conceivable.
Can I self-disclose that I occasionally get bleak and dystopian about all of this?
Okay, it's a little therapy session just between you and me and
everybody who's
listeners.
Listening. I was talking to a colleague about this a month or two back. Not horribly so, but I think it's incumbent upon us to ask questions like this. Like I was listening to a re-release of an episode over on the 99% Invisible podcast, which is really about design and architecture and cities and stuff. And I had listened to this original episode back in 2022, I think, and they kind of remixed it and put some new stuff in it and released it in 2025. And it was really all about shopping malls, of all things. And there were a lot of kind of interesting angles. Like I think on one of the streaming services, there's secret mall apartment is a thing, and they pulled in some of those ideas into this. But the idea with one of these mall scholars, if you will, of the decline of shopping malls. And I think we've all kind of experienced that in the US. And like one of the factoids, if I understood it correctly, was we sort of peaked in the US with about around 2,000 shopping malls in the early 2000s. But today we're somewhere around like 800 nationwide. And we've all seen probably those malls where the DMV has moved in, or there's a trampoline center, or
They're selling seasonal, Halloween costumes or something.
yeah, or they knock it flat and they put up something else, or people talk about things like, affordable housing, or, whatever. There's all kinds of things, repurposed, reuse kind of stuff. And I just wonder what's past growth for online programs. Do we, you talked about plateauing, but do we see at some point receding? And then do we see something transformative? Is it what Tom Tobin has talked about when he was on here not too long ago about at some point it's just teaching, at some point it's just learning? Is it that, or is it something else? Because I don't know that you can really repurpose online learning in the same way that you can repurpose mall space.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, especially kind of bringing in this example from a completely different discipline to bounce up against what we're looking at. As you know, I've written about this post-modality era, and so I do think Tom Tobin's onto something with that concept. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I might flip your thought experiment around and say that in my mind, online is the disruptor that's killing the malls. It's Amazon and other online services, but mostly Amazon that's making people not go to the malls so much. I gather, and you could say that maybe some of the struggles with enrollments at traditional campuses is the result of online being available to those students. So I don't know, but yeah, who's not to say that there isn't some bigger predator come along that will eat online learning, whatever that may be. Maybe it's AI. AI will be the answer to everything, dystopian. But I don't know what that might look like. I think right now we in the world we live in is probably acting more the disruptor than the disrupted at this point.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And like I said, I don't live there long, but I find it helpful to ask the question now and again. Yeah. Because we can think that we're the apex predator all we want to, but I mean, that's a level of arrogance that gets you eaten at some point, I think.
You just saw the Jurassic Park movie, I can tell, right?
I did. I really did. Last weekend. It was pretty good. You should go see it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Anything else we want to talk about with Morgan's other 3 points?
Yeah, so very quickly on just maybe one thing on market concentration. I agree with her. Obviously, she has data to back it up, so I'm not going to argue with the data. But just sort of on the surface and my own observations, I agree. And if you recall back during, maybe it was last summer, when all of it was flying around, 2024, if you're listening to this at some other future date, there was an awful lot of scuttlebutt and anxiety around new federal regulations and what that would do to the online learning space, potentially eliminating state authorization, reciprocity, maybe other kinds of like just impositions of restrictions and guidance that, in my mind, would only favor the big players because they had the compliance infrastructure to deal with it all, and that would further concentrate market share into the big, as EAB likes to call them, the online giants, and we kind of know we all know who they are. There's just, you can probably count them on 6 fingers, and I think it's probably not good for students ultimately to have so much market share concentrated into so few number of choices. So it is something I worry about, and I think it's something that we should all continue to push on, keeping in mind that the vast majority of our online students come from whatever it is, 100 miles within the campus, keeping in mind what they need. And if we all do that, then we're serving the students we need to serve.
Yeah, and I do think that's where the intersection of these other things, like you said, localness, and we've talked before on here many times from different angles about differentiation of institution based on mission and all that. The intersection of that with the market forces, I think, lead you somewhere, hopefully. Yeah. I hope. I can't allow us to hit stop without maybe us commenting a little bit about student success stuff, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I thought two things. One, I thought you asked a really good set of questions, and I thought Morgan made a really good statement as a reminder. You said, if I heard you right, kind of speaking to institutions broadly, institutions, are you really committed to success online, or do you just want revenue? I thought that's a good rudder, that question.
I mean, how many times have we had conversations with colleagues and it seems like, well, why are you doing it? And if it's just about the money, you're setting yourself up for problems.
But then Morgan's good reminder is aligned with that, and it's about money too, but it's flowing the other direction. Regarding student success online, she said, it's going to take time, it's going to take money.
Yeah, I don't
like
disagree
a reminder
with her at all. It's an investment, right? You can't just assume students are going to show up and everything's going to be wonderful. They need to be watered and fertilized and cared for and need plenty of sunshine in order for them to grow and graduate.
Yeah, and we talked about this some when Carmen Chan was on the podcast back in episode 156, reframing the data that tell the stories about online students. But Morgan made a comment about kind of alluding to the fact that traditional data and metrics may be insufficient to guide us. So that's something to pay attention to, that evolution of what's a campus-based student? What's an online student? What is that?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, how many times have we been asked, like, how many online students do you have? You're like, well, what do you mean by that?
That's right.
Is it, one class or more, all online, mostly online? Are you counting blended? Like, you could answer that question 10 different ways.
I usually do.
I know. Well, I usually start with, what do you mean? What are you really asking there? But I agree with Carmen and with Morgan that a lot of times the metrics that by which we are judged aren't the right measuring stick. Like we have, as you know, having been in Florida, that we have state, performance funding, and much of it is based on 4-year graduation rates. And we're an urban campus that has, an awful lot of part-time students. Like, is the 4-year graduation rate the right metric for students like that? And are transfer students different or adult learners different? Not everything is based upon maybe the experience that a lot of the policymakers had, which is they go away for 4 years after high school and then come home. And, people's lives are just a lot more complex than that. And I think the metrics need to reflect that.
Yeah, no, for sure. So much more we could say about, the concentrated distillation of wise insights from Glenda Morgan, but let's not.
In the interest of time, I'll just say subscribe to the On EdTech newsletter where Morgan is a contributor, and you can get her insights all the time.
And listen to the Online Education Across the Atlantic podcast. It's a really good podcast.
It really is. Yeah, I'm a fan. And I'm glad we've been able to bag them all.
Now I feel
Pokemon
predatory
collection.
again. Now I feel predatory.
No, I'm being a little more benign with the Pokemon, not Jurassic Park.
Oh, okay.
All right, maybe I should land the plane.
Please do.
Making sense of our complex and evolving field is never easy. If it was easy, anyone could do it. We wouldn't need Dr. Glenda Morgan. But insights from data-driven colleagues like Morgan are essential to guiding our understanding and planning, and I certainly rely on them.
Yeah, well said. Well, this has been delightful as always. My beverage is running a little bit low. The attention span of our listeners has already run out. Nobody's even listening to this part of the podcast. It's just you and me talking at this point. But if you are here, dear listener, we appreciate you. Keep listening all the way until last call, and maybe even a little bit beyond. Don't unsubscribe. Until next time, for Topcast, I'm Kelvin.
And I'm Tom.
See ya.